everybody. This is going to be the best panel of the entire conference because it has 4 admirals sitting up here, so how can it be bad? So what we're going to talk about is interactions and coordination at sea. And I would just say that I've had the great pleasure of, in years gone by, operating with the Royal Malaysian Navy, which is, it was a very rewarding and professional experience. Besides having a great exercise, we also snuck into a small little island, resort island afterwards, dropped the anchor and surprised all the tourists who were there when a bunch of Malaysian and U.S. sailors arrived. And I've also had the pleasure of operating with the Maritime Self-Defense Force from Japan over many years and have constantly been impressed with their professionalism. While I have not operated with the Vietnamese Navy, I have sailed in the waters off of Vietnam, stretching all the way from Hai Phong down south to the Gulf of Thailand, starting way back in 1964. While I don't know your Navy, I know your waters. And so it's a real pleasure to be able to chair this discussion. And I'd like to go ahead and start with Rear Admiral Aziz. He's now retired. He was the former First Admiral of the Royal Malaysian Navy and currently is the political and security advisor to the International Committee of the Red Cross in Geneva. So a really important and very worthwhile position. He's going to talk to us about managing South China Sea dispute, the incidents at sea agreements, the collision regulations and queues, and have some observations on whether or not these are effective mechanisms for making sure we have safe interactions on the high seas. And so with that, Admiral Aziz, can I turn the floor over to you?
Thanks, Mike. Can I have the slide? First, let me do the pleasantry by saying thanks to the organizer, the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, the Foundation East Studies, and the Vietnam Lawyers Association. This is my 3rd time addressing the conference, and I thank you for inviting me, even though I'm now with the International Committee of the Red Cross. While it's based in Geneva, I'm actually based in Kuala Lumpur, looking after the regional in Kuala Lumpur. Coming from the ICRC, I thank the organizers for inviting ICRC to be part of this conference, and as an organization that looks at the Geneva Conventions, the protocols, and all those weapon conventions, it is one of the things that we do in managing conflicts, especially in the South China Sea. Now, I would also like to thank the previous panel for actually taking up half of my presentation, showing what the future is going to be. And it seemed by looking at the gloomy faces that we have in the conference room that the future is very bleak. But then what I'm doing today is to give you a solution that is presently available. And well, it's not all that bleak if countries and parties to the conflict, to the dispute, following their obligation under the various tools that we have. Now, I've chosen 3 for the simple reason is one is dealing with bilateral agreement. Second is a treaty which most of the countries here are party to it, to the fact that there are 150 countries who sign on to the coalition regulation. And the third is queues, that came out from the WPNS, which I'm glad to say that I was part of it and chairing the workshop in Kuala Lumpur and later in Nanjing, China, and finally being adopted in Qingdao in 2014. Now, when we talk about the in-sea agreement, this is what the former Chief of Naval Operation, Elmo, said about the in-sea agreement. It was before the in-sea agreement. It was basically something of who dares most. Right? He used the incident with the Soviet Navy as one of extreme dangerous and exhilarating running game of chicken. Right? Who dare most? Then with the NC signing by the Americans and United States, the issue of clear and fast future danger is still there. The fact that we have NCs and all the other tools, what we have today, even with the PCA tribunal giving out its arbitration award, the situations are not going to change. Perhaps it's going to be worse, in a sense that it's not something of a jurisdictional dispute. It becomes an issue of sovereignty. When it becomes an issue of sovereignty, you will not see much white hull enforcing issues of sovereignty. You might see gray hulls, meaning you will see more military ships operating in South China Sea. Now, comments on the NC has confidence building measures. There are two schools of thoughts. One that says it's good. There are proponents to the NC that saying that the fact that we have a situation in South China Sea, we now should have another NC of all the countries in the region who have got disputes with China. Now, there are also others who says, no, we don't need it, because it's more of military to military relationship rather than in the realm of police enforcement or law enforcement. Now, we don't have INSEE for the law enforcement. We do have for the military. What is good about INSEE is that it regulates the behavior of actors at sea. Now, the fact that some are saying skeptical about INSEE, US had a kind of a hybrid kind of INSEE with China. Recently in 2014, they signed on to the agreement and they came out with an MOU which was mentioned by the last panel. So there is an MOU on encounter, surface encounter at sea and also in the air. In 2015, they came up with the MOU for the air encounter. And the last panel, I think Dr. Tang did mention that it works. It works as far as the military, but shouldn't we look into the mechanism and pass it on and adopt it for the law enforcement agencies who are also operating in the area? Now, retired Admiral Robert Cruz says that the Soviet really did everything possible to preserve the agreement and re-establish confidence building. They handled the conduct at sea in Japan openly, and we did establish confidence between the two. But when the idea was floated around to the American, there was proponents of people who were saying that, no, we don't need one. We don't need it because we already have it. Now, Admiral Rockhaug was saying that we have it, was looking into the collision regulation. He says that's already the collision regulation. We don't need a new mechanism to have a look and to regulate the behavior of our actors at sea. Now, Colrec, true enough, did have some articles that talks about how we deal with ships when you meet ships unplanned encounter. And it does, Article 3 provides for when ship operating in close proximity, the ship should remain clear and avoid risk of collision. Now it follows on with a lot of other things that are provided under Article 2 and Article 3. But the fact that it has been signed by 150 countries, including all those countries in this region, does it in any way regulate the behavior? We still see the Americans and the Chinese before the signing of the MOU. There are some near misses. There are bumping accidents, brushing out of each other. And these are all parties to the correct. So in a sense, perhaps signing off the MOU, having a hybrid kind of NC would be a better solution. However, it is a bilateral agreement. It's an agreement between one country to another, whereas CORAC is a treaty. Now, having tools of a treaty, if no one is following it, then the situation is not going to be better. Next, we have queues. In 2014, leaders, the naval leaders of this region in the WPNS, 21 of them, sign on to queues. It is a non-legal binding agreement between parties. What it does is it provides standard protocol for safety procedures. It provides basic communication between parties who meets unplanned encounter at sea. It begins actually in 2000, in the year 2000, has Code of Unalerted Encounter at Sea. But it changes its name because in Kuala Lumpur, when China was a party to the discussion, decided that there are certain words in which they don't agree. One of the words is unalerted. Because mention unalerted means you're bringing up suspicion. People are suspicious of the other who creates an alert. So therefore, the words unalerted was taken out, and we changed it into unplanned. But the crux of the thing is we sign on to queues. And the fact that queues were also included in the Memorandum of Understanding within China and the United States, queues seems to work. Now, Admiral Wu Xingli says this about queues. He says we need to respect history, take history as a mirror, and continue to resolve maritime disputes and conflicts through peaceful means, as well as to avoid extreme behavior that may endanger regional security and stability. China is very into it as far as queues are concerned. We have the Chief Cabinet Secretary of Japan who says that we will use queue as an avenue of strengthening Japan's efforts in persuading China to bring into force a broader maritime crisis management mechanism between defense minister and the two countries. Now, what is important about queues is that immediately after the symposium, the leaders agreed that queues should be extended to the law enforcement agencies. To the fact that we had 3 meetings on how to expand queues for the law enforcement agencies. We have yet to see a result of it, but then it should be expanded further. The political will has got to be there to ensure that it is also expanded to the law enforcement agency. Now, why should we need such mechanism? It is a cooperation of certain maritime issues, obligatory under the various conventions negotiated to United Nations and the International Maritime Organization, which relates to CORAC. It's a utility of naval force as instrument of state policy. The economy of most countries is increasingly dependent on seaborne trade. Maritime conflict would have global implication on other users. Now the sea looks a new frontier for resources, economic gain, and economic resource exploitation that was dealt with the previous term. Now the importance of the mechanism is this. Now I emphasizing on the word reduced possibility of conflict out of accident, miscalculation, and failure of communication. Now to conclude, I would then reiterate what has been said by the previous panel, including speakers from Vietnam, saying that queues should then be expanded to the law enforcement agencies, and the instruments are there to manage reducing tension so that tension does not go into a conflict. With that, I hand it over to the chair.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for, I think, a really helpful rundown of the differences. And in this case, despite U.S. Navy senior flag officer opposition a few years ago, I think in practice, the United States Navy has come to appreciate how valuable CUES is, and quite frankly, use it quite frequently, often with the PLA Navy in the South China Sea. Regarding expansion of CUES to Coast Guards or law enforcement, maritime law enforcement agencies, the U.S. doesn't have any forward deployed Coast Guard or MLE cutters running around the South China Sea, so that would make it's more of all of the regional Coast Guards would have to agree to that. The U.S. In many ways is an observer in the debate, thinking it would be a good idea, but we don't have a Coast Guard presence here to practice it with. So let me now turn to Admiral Kaneda. Kaneda-san is somebody who he and I have been showing up at conferences together for longer than I care to remember now, who's going to be talking about the management of incidents at sea.
Okay. Thank you, Admiral McDevitt. And thank you very much for Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and the Foundation for East Sea Studies and Vietnam Lawyer Association. Let me have the opportunity to talk about the management of the incident at sea in the session titled The Interactions and Coordination at Sea. It is a great honor for me as a retired Vice Admiral of Japan and Maritime Self-Defense Force. Today, I would like to talk about the management of current typical mechanism of the maritime incident prevention agreements. It is similar to Malaysian Admiral. And the US and China as references before focusing on the progress of the maritime communication mechanism, MCM, dialogue between Japan and China. If you need a reference, please look at the page 63 to 64 of this handbook. First, I would like to talk about the INC agreement between the US, USSR, and Japan and Russia. Needless to say, the crisis management is essential and absolute necessities in any country. The basic function of a crisis management is the crisis management mechanism. Without such a mechanism, any crisis or near crisis arisen between two countries may lead to misunderstanding in the counterpart's intention, which will make it difficult to appropriately address and assess the situation. The same principle can be applied to the relationship between the Coast Guard and defense authorities, including the Navy of the two countries, as Admiral McDevitt said. The options for the maritime crisis management mechanism may include the conclusion of an agreement to prevent contingencies and incidentals, setting up hotlines to prevent escalation of incident, mutual confidence building through periodical dialogue in every level, and the promotion of mutual understanding. From this point of view, immediately following the end of the Cold War, Japan has made the Japan-Russia Incident at Sea Agreement, aiming for preventing the maritime accident and promoting confidence building with Russia with significant success. The model of the Maritime Incident Prevention Agreement was the, as Martian said, Incidents at Sea Agreement, INC-Sea, so-called, made between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War situation. The INC-Sea Agreement between the US and Soviet Union was the very first international agreement made for the purpose of preventing maritime accidents and incidents. This agreement was made in 1972 due to various accidents and incidents occurred between the East and the West during the Cold War, involving vessels and military airplanes. Since then, the INC-Sea became a typical model of the similar agreements made between various countries. The INC-Sea between the US and Soviet Union consisted of 10 articles, and the subjects involved were to regulate dangerous maneuvers made by vessels and military airplanes, to prohibit harassment acts, to enhance and encourage the maritime communication, and to have periodical dialogue and information exchange between naval forces. In 1990, just after the Cold War, the Soviet Union made a proposal to Japan to enter such agreement. And in October 1993, after the end of Cold War, then Russia and Japan signed the Japan-Russia Maritime Incident Prevention Agreement, which took INC-Sea between the US and the Soviet Union as a model. This agreement became a forerunner of Japan-Russian Defense Cooperation. And even now, we have found significant outcome resulted from the periodical dialogue between the two countries. The agreement consists of 11 articles and is almost the same as the US-Soviet INC-Sea agreement. Similar agreements have been made between the Soviet Union and UK, or Russia, and UK, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and the Netherlands, Norway, and South Korea. The second thing is a mechanism to prevent maritime and air incident between the US and China. Now, what kind of agreements have been made between the US and China concerning their conflicts at the South China Sea and the East China Sea? The significant crisis arisen from the patrolling activity of the US aircraft carrier task group in the Yellow Sea in October 1994 led to make the US and China agree with the Military Maritime Consultation Agreement, so-called MMCA, in January 1998. The agreement itself did not stipulate any common rules to prevent accidents and incidents, reflecting their confrontational relationship at that time. One reason was a difference in their interpretation of the law of the ocean, mainly concerning the military surveillance activity in the EEZ. At the same time, it might reflect their deep-rooted conflicts concerning the Taiwan Strait missile incident occurred in 1995 and 1996. And agreement emphasized the importance of communication between relevant authorities, but indicated the difficulty to securing the effectiveness of the agreement between nations with less sense of common interest. Even today, there have been frequent incidents occurred between the US and China involving a near contact. And still, both countries have established the various multi-level mechanisms for the crisis management in addition to the MMEA. One of such additional mechanisms is a core hotline between the president, but this is not worked so well. The second additional mechanism between the US and China is the talk of entering Ink Sea between the US and China. However, the US officials have maintained their opposition to Ink Sea with China because of the almost the same reason why they didn't. The third additional mechanism is a defense telephone link, a DTL, which is a little bit working at, but very low level contact. The fourth additional mechanism is called for unplanned encounter, CUES, C-U-E-S, which Malaysian Admiral said. This would be expected to be work well. The last one is the maritime confidence building measure, MCBM, made in November 2014 with a 2 MOU. Yes, but just started. So I'm going to make final things for high tension at the East China Sea and MCM, Maritime Coordination Mechanism, dialogue between Japan and China. Reiterating the well-known fact, bilateral official consultation of the maritime communication mechanism between Japan and China was held for the first time in April 2008 in Beijing. And the initiative in 2007, or so-called mutual beneficial relationship based on the common strategic interests, agreed by the then Prime Minister Abe and Mr. Wen Jiabao. Since then, the official working group the dialogue were held in Tokyo in July 2010 and so on, 3 times until 2014. And however, the mutual relationship between Japan and China rapidly deteriorated soon afterward, mainly because of the issue of the Senkaku Islands, and the dialogues was suspended ever since. Recently, however, there was a new development on this issue. On September 24, 2014, the Japan-China Senior Official Maritime Consultation Dialogue, which is the newly established dialogue between both countries, was held in Beijing, where both sides are also discussed to resume the dialogue on MCM. In recent years, however, the tensions are building between the Coast Guard and the Defense Authority of Japan and China, mainly in the East China Sea around Senkaku Island. Actually, there was several dangerous encounters occurred involved the ships and airplanes of the Coast Guard and Defense Authorities. Both sides have increasingly realized the need to create MCM in order to avoid such incidents that might easily lead to contingencies of military confrontation or possible escalation to crisis in the bilateral relationship. The Coast Guard and the defense authorities of both sides, Japan and China, were the ones that felt such needs the strongest. However, political concern used to prevent any advancement in the talk of MCM. In the past, the relevant authorities of Japan and China have reviewed the possibility of setting 3 functions for MCM, including 1, establishment of the regular meeting between the various level officials, including each top leader of the maritime authorities. 2, setting up hotlines connecting various levels of the maritime authorities, including a theater at sea of both countries. And the 3, establishment of appropriate common communication agreement, including a set of common rules and signals. The items 1 and 2 are self-explanatory. In regard to item 3, there are several kinds of international agreements that can be applied. Yet on the item 3, consensus has not been built between Japan and China. But there was good news on this point, as Malaysian Admiral said. In May 2014, members of the WPNS, as a common rule, adopt the cues as a common rule and communication method of the regional navies. So that has resolved the issue of item 3, as both Japan and China can now adopt these cues for MCM. What remained is the issue of political decision only. Japanese side has been quite willing to conclude MCM. And the Prime Minister Abe has repeatedly called the Chinese side for early conclusion of each agreement, taking every opportunity. During the Shangri-La dialogue in 2014, for which I myself have participated, Prime Minister Abe made a keynote speech in which he said in 2007, Chinese Prime Minister went at the time and myself agreed to conclude crisis management mechanism between the both and promised to establish maritime and air communication mechanism. I believe that if such agreement would be operationalized between Japan and China, it will lead to peace and stability of not only Japan and China, but also the region as a whole. Then the Chinese representatives attending the same dialogue also said that we must strengthen dialogue and communication with regional countries, including Japan, to effectively address any emergency situation. And he said, to secure the timely communication to appropriately address the differences. During the Japan-China maritime dialogue between high administrative officials held in Beijing in September 2014, both countries agreed to resume the dialogue MCM, which already took. Okay. 1, 2 minutes. The minister. Okay. The Minister of Defense and the Surrender Force of Japan, with the early conclusion of MCM as well. And I think there is no military officer who might be a trigger of some escalation for the minor incident. And I hope in the consultation between the U.S. and as the U.S.-Soviet Union in the Cold War era, the issue of self-separation dialogue stuck by the Soviet Union at that time was unsolved. But the parties at that time shared that this issue and the agreement was concluded at last. Inksea worked efficiently since then, and it become an internationally good model. Here, I would like to ask the Chinese side for the early conclusion on Japan-China MCM agreement. To that end, we should shelve some conflicts of the ideas, such as a territorial issue regarding between Japan and China. And also, we should not be waiting for all the relevant agencies, including Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force. But if some consensus were made, that those organizations between the China and Japan must be concluded earlier. If that is realized, I think the agreement between Japan and China could be a good model of the crisis management framework at sea and air, not only East China Sea, but also South China Sea, between the relevant countries, including China. I think I will conclude my explanation, but all that I had explained here is my private idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Kaneda. The Admiral mentioned in passing in 1994 the dispute between the U.S. and China over military operations in China's exclusive economic zone. I think it's important to point out that disagreement between China and the United States persists till today. In fact, it's the most serious disagreement between the United States and China in terms of the legal framework for maritime operations. China believes that for military operations to be conducted in its exclusive economic zone, you need to get permission from China to do so. The United States believes that the law of the sea includes all high seas freedoms that are permitted in the exclusive economic zone of any country, including military operations. So the difference is, we say, the United States says we do not need permission to do it. China says you do need permission to do it. And we continue to disagree on this point. Now let me turn the microphone over to Associate Professor and Rear Admiral Do Min Tai, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Vietnamese People's Navy. And he's going to speak to us today about practical cooperation in dealing with maritime security issues. Admiral Tai.
Thank you, Chairman, for a very nice introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this conference and for giving us a very, very good opportunity to learn from your knowledge and to share with you our lesson learned, our experience, even our security concern. I apologize for having no time to prepare a PowerPoint presentation. And as you can see, on speaker yesterday and today spoke in English. Now I would like to make a chance. I prefer to speak in Vietnamese. Thank you for your patience.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you emphasized, in the past 2 days, the dispute over the South China Sea is related to sovereignty issues of Paracel, and especially there's only 2 parties disputing the Paracel, while there are 6 parties of dispute in the Spratly. Although South China Sea is a semi-enclosed sea, but it's covered about 3.5 million square kilometers. So it is very important for the trade, economics, and also security, and it also affects the balance of power in the region. The dispute in the South China Sea will also important because it connects many seas from Indian to South China Sea. The importance of growing economies and importance of Silk Road, making the dispute over the South China Sea become more important than ever. This emphasizes that South China Sea dispute will greatly impact one of the most significant strategic regions in the region. South China Sea is related to many countries in the region and the world. So on that basis, we think that there should be some mechanism of cooperation in practice involving all parties in order to resolve the maritime security issue. Recently, non-traditional security issues and traditional issues at sea has increased and created new challenges for regional security and endanger the economic development of the regions. To settle these challenge, on the one hand, we need to strengthen our internal strength, and at the same time, we need to expand our cooperation with international friends. We have also boost our propaganda about the danger of non-security issues, about the right and responsibility of citizens in preventing and encountering non-traditional security issues to ensure the development of our nation. We need to settle the relationship between traditional and non-traditional security issues in the context of globalization. We have also enhanced research and making prediction on the challenge at sea, particularly the impact of climate change. Transnational crimes, terrorism, human trafficking at sea. We concentrate on projecting developing socio-economic development at sea, green and sustainable development, and create socio-economic mechanism for preventing and encountering national disaster and environment protection. We will proactively participate in international cooperation in encounter non-traditional security issues. Vietnam proactively participate in dialogue mechanism and believe that it will be one of the important mechanisms for resolving challenges in order to expand internal cooperation, intra-cooperation of ASEAN, and the extra cooperation of ASEAN with dialogue partners. In the region, there are many mechanisms and important dialogue mechanisms such as ASEAN, and other conference involving the intelligent maritime policy and dialogue mechanism for defense official. At the regional level, ASEAN plays a central place in regional mechanisms such as ARF, ADMM+, and the dialogues mechanism mentioned by you earlier, including Shangri-La dialogues, the West Pacific Naval Symposium. These are strategic dialogue mechanism so that ASEAN and ASEAN partner can exchange our views and reaching a consensus. and work out on the mechanism in countering non-traditional security in general and non-traditional security SC in particular. In particular, Vietnam actively involved in ADMM plus activity such as disaster relief and counter terrorism, security, maritime security, maritime medicine, anti-mine. These involve 3 cases of. So in the past time, this cooperation has been brought into practice, and so in promoting ASEAN cooperation for peace, security, and prosperity, for resolving the sovereignty dispute, we believe that all the parties concerned need to observe to international law, particularly UNCLOS, DOC, and striving toward building a COC in order to resolve. This is a particular significant issue because it creates a legal foundation for all the parties concerned. So in the context that there are differences in the claims and position of all the parties, so we need to strictly observe to international laws in order to promote cooperation. So if all the parties restrict their claim within the framework of UNCLOS 1982, so the dispute over sovereignty can be resolved, and thus bringing about great benefit for all the parties as well as the regional peace and security. Because all the complexity of these dispute, we need to make use of all the bilateral and multilateral cooperation mechanism. If the dispute involving 2 parties, it can be settled through bilateral cooperation. However, for the multi-party dispute, we need multilateral mechanism to discuss and negotiate. Regarding the freedom of aviation and navigation, as well as the interest of extra regional non-claimant parties, I think that we need to involve other parties as well, because if we just hold negotiation among ourselves, it will create criticism among the others. Why the dispute over the South China Sea continue to escalate? Research on the dispute has not been and the mechanism had not been catch up well with the real development, particularly the prospect of DOC in the future. Even if we reach a COC, it's not guaranteed that the COC can be implemented, because given the different interests and position among the parties, the mechanism will deal with the specific aspect of security, maritime security in the region, and together have to resolve the broader structure of the and such a broad security structure will help manage the relation among countries at the regional and also national level. With regard to environment protection, pending the resolvement of sovereignty dispute, all the parties need to cooperate in environment protection, including the restoration of coral reef, natural fishery resources, to exploit the potential of the South China Sea based on sustainable development, such as ecological cooperation. One of the solutions for resettling maritime security is a mechanism over the unattended collision at sea, joint patrols. I would like to emphasize that the ASEAN Navy official meeting, we have agreed on the mechanism for Hello ASEAN so that the Navy ship will read together, and it will serve as the foundation for extending the code of conduct Q at sea. So extending the Q for maritime, for submarine, will be effective. Another cooperation is joint naval patrol in contiguous area or overlapping water. So in the past year, we have conducted joint patrols with China twice any years, with Thailand twice a year, and with the Cambodian Navy 4 times a year. We and other partners recognize that the situation has been improved after the joint patrols. So at the moment, we want to extend the joint patrols with other parties on the basis that it is not related to the sovereignty claims, but to protect a secure and stable environment in the regions. Regarding the hotlines among the navies, we have established one with China, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia. And we believe that the hotlines has been quite effective in resolving the incident at sea. In the coming time, we believe that we need to proactively coordinate with the Coast Guard of neighboring countries in protecting our island and islet, and through the agreed mechanism and agreement to find out about the new issues and the challenge, so not to complicate the issues. All the organs and units at sea will need to coordinate with their counterpart in the other countries. And on the level and branches need to have concerted coordination. And in international cooperation, we need to base on the position and interests of each party in exercising and implementing international law. We need to restrain from use of force and further complicated the matters. Given the priority to building implementing DOC and striving toward building a COC, and achieving a consensus on the implementation of DOC. I would like to end my presentation here and looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Admiral. That was very informative. I'm sure there are other people in the room who knew that how successful you have been with the hotlines with any number of countries, as well as the joint maritime patrols, but it was welcome news to me, and I congratulate the proactive nature of the VPN in executing those various and sundry confidence-building measures. It's not easy to get these things up and working, and the fact that you have them up and working is really encouraging. With that, the floor is open for questions. Yes, sir, and I bet you I know what your question is going to be. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Vladimir Evseev, Russian Institute for Commonwealth Countries. My question to Japanese speaker. And I quite agree with you that Russia and Japan, Soviet Union and Japan have good experience in managing of accident at sea. And I hope that Russia and Japan begin military cooperation in Navy in the near future. But Russia have good cooperation with China. What do you think if we organize triangle cooperation? Japan, Russia, and China. Because if Russia and Japan have good cooperation and China and Russia have good cooperation, maybe it is possible to speak about triangle cooperation, as well as in South China Sea. Thank you.
Why don't we collect a couple of questions here first? There, I'm having a hard time seeing the distance. Professor Singh. And then Colin, you're next.
Thank you, sir. I actually have a comment, and then I'm going to follow that up with a question to Rear Admiral Abdul Aziz, as well as Admiral Kaneda. Both of you or any of you can answer this. Very clearly, there's progress being made on the confidence building measures at sea. But it is the popular perception of many maritime analysts in Southeast Asia and also in South Asia that the CUES arrangement, as well as this MOU that the US has signed with China, which is really on air and sea encounters at sea, has not been really very effective because of 2 or 3 reasons. One, they point out that this is an agreement that's really between the navies. It's a communication protocol, the CUES especially, between the navies. And the moment you have coast guards and militias involved, you know, you have the fisheries and the coastal marine service that China has. This agreement does not produce the required results because these agencies are not covered under the ambit of all of this. Second, they point out that these sort of agreements are really for the high seas. In the near seas, the agreement clearly says that this is without prejudice to every side's interpretation of the maritime law with regard to what it says on military activities within these EEZs or the near seas. So my question to both of you would be, sir, that how is it that we can make these agreements more effective in the sense that there are very clearly lines drawn out, or that the ambit of effectiveness is very clearly defined, and there's only so much that you can do to make these agreements perform and deliver so as to produce greater security in that region? Thank you.
Sebastian, Colin.
I have one question to all speakers. Do you really think that China wish the establishment of crisis management mechanism in China seas? Because I'm not sure there is a tradition in the PLA, in the crisis management mechanism. Most of theory and practice in the PLA and among the military experts come from the United States. So I think that there is no mainstream in the PLA and among the military experts on the crisis management in China seas. The policy is mainly to increase up to now, these last years, and up to now the policy was to increase the military presence in East China Sea and South China Sea. So my question is, do you really think that is the wish of China to establish this kind of mechanism? I have a second question to Mr. Kaneda regarding the MCM. The name is now MACM because the mechanism became also aerial since the establishment of the ADAZ in East China Sea. So do you think the negotiation of this MACM can be successful in East China Sea, regarding the main obstacle concerning the sovereignty of Senkaku Islands, because it was the main obstacle during the negotiation, because Japan wanted to exclude the Senkaku Island of the scope of the MSEM, and of course China wanted to include islands. So do you think this situation can be changed despite the adoption of the 4 consensus in 2014 between Xi Jinping and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe? Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let the panel answer, and then Professor Tonneson will be next after. Wait a second. Let me get their answer first, and then I think some of those questions everybody may have a view on. So, Admiral, would you like to start responding to some of the questions, and then Admiral Kaneda, and then Admiral Aziz? Not me. Oh, you want Kaneda to go first? Okay.
Thanks for all the giving us a good question. Okay, first one is a Russian friend. Yes, we have succeeded to conclude the Japan-Russia so-called INCSI agreement, and as I said, and we wish, and your side wish strongly to continue this agreement, and. Your question is if my understanding for your question is if it could also apply to Japan-China relationship.
Sorry, I'm speaking about trigle. Russia, Japan, and China trigle. Trigle cooperation. Three sides.
Okay. I think these kind of agreement should be limited, basically limited to the bilateral. We must have another framework to the confidence building measure in the region. This type of the agreement, INCSI type, should be bilateral. Because of the difference between relationship with the country, I believe so, and there would not be such a. It is quite difficult to see such a trilateral or multilateral INCSI agreement. All of the agreement should be limited to bilateral things, and I think that would be. We need to do. And but if the China, Russia, and Japan, the formulation of some kind of confidence building measure or another type of crisis management measure, we would be very, very happy to join such a consultation, right? And second thing, Indian, I couldn't understand but so you asking the Navy, not only the Navy, but also the relationship between Coast Guard. Is it possible or very difficult? I caught up your question. Well, Navy must be first, and in Japan, for instance, you've seen in the Senkaku issue, the first line should be owned by the responsibility of the Japanese Coast Guard. So I think. Not only Navy, but the Air Force, but also the Coast Guard would need such a mechanism. And we have already started between Japan and China another framework other than the Japan MCM dialogue. This kind of negotiation is very slow, because of the difference between the Coast Guard and that is law enforcement. And for instance, the operation of the Coast Guard should be, for instance, including the how do you say, contact with the other ship, the ship, objective ship, and go into the Coast Guard people into the objective ship. So I think the Navy to Navy, that kind of thing would not be happen. So just a bit different. However, so it would take a long time for the MCM. But two things. Firstly, as I said in my presentation, the Navy first. Navy would be much easier to agreement, to conclude this agreement. And then the Coast Guard would not reach upon the conclusion, but they would, suggest it from the idea of the, evading the coincidental crash. So I think this is one of the good things from, yeah. And the third one? Okay.
Did your question get answered in that?
Oh, no, I didn't see it. Mr. Colin, I must say to your question, and I don't know if the China wish to conclude the this one. But when I met with the many active and retired admirals and higher ranking officials of the Navy guy, of the PLA Navy, everyone I found they are wishing to have an earlier conclusion of the MCM type agreement between two countries. This is true. Yeah, I hope so.
Admiral Tai, would you like to chime in on, would you like to comment on any of these issues?
Allow me to have some one comment to the question by Sebastian. Actually, your question is very hard. And maybe Mr. Sebastian can find it easier to answer that question because you are based in Hong Kong and you focus on researching China. And or our Chinese colleague can have an even better answer. However, out of my opinion, I wish to say as follows. I believe that after finishing the artificial island building in South China Sea, China will seek crisis management mechanisms or agreements, but only based on bilateral basis. In international relations, especially when it comes to security and national defense, I see, and out of my observation, China has always been sought after bilateral agreements. Therefore, I think bilateral agreements are very likely and most feasible. Thank you.
Let me answer on the first question of whether queues can be adopted to the law enforcement agencies. Rightly, you have pointed out that there are some differences between how the Coast Guard, the law enforcement agency, operates and the Navy. But then these are things that we can move on and we can adopt in accordance to how they operate. I have mentioned that we had 3 meetings in order to get that into adoption, and then one of it, I think, is done by MIMA, Malaysian Institute of Maritime Agencies, and an international body called humanitarian dialogue based in Geneva. So there are supporters of this, and one of it that are very vocal is Singapore, getting it to be passed on to the law enforcement agencies. There are differences, but we will have to work on what are common rather than working on what are the differences between the Coast Guards or the law enforcement agencies there is. So they are looking at the rules in the use of force rather than rules of engagement. So I foresee that that's something that we can work on if parties are really having the political will to push it on. And that will be something that we'll see in the near future. Now, does China will agree on the crisis management mechanism at sea? Well, if they can agree to queues, if they can agree to an MOU within US and China, especially when the dispute is freedom of navigation and it's still there, I don't see that China would not go into a bilateral dialogue and agreement in creating a mechanism, crisis management at sea. Perhaps if it is not with ASEAN, China ASEAN, it will be with the claimant countries.
Thank you for those very helpful interventions. Professor Tonneson and then Professor Song.
I have three questions about the same topic, and that is the freedom of military operations in the exclusive economic zone of other countries. And I'm not thinking about innocent passage, but about surveillance activities and exercises. And the question is to all four admirals, including the chair. The first question is it a problem for nations defending that principle of the full freedom of navigation that several local countries share the view of China? I'm thinking here about India, Thailand, Vietnam, and have included in their national legislation a need for permission. The second question is it desirable that other nations outside of the region should build sufficient courage to join in freedom of navigation operations with the United States? For instance, European countries. And the third question, is it likely that China, once it in the future recognizes the exclusive economic zones of other countries, will change its view in order to be able to operate militarily within the EEZ of other countries? Thank you.
Well, you want to go? Because I'm going to. Okay. Well, first of all, let's get Professor Song's comments too, because we have about 12 minutes left here.
Well, thank you very much. Very brief questions. I'm wondering, any one of the speakers in the sessions could talk more about the submarine procurement, the increasing number of submarines in the regions, and then and after that, can any one of the speakers talk more about the proposal to include submarines in the 2014 queues? Is it necessary, too early, or is it too late? Thank you.
Two very good questions, yes. Well, let me, if I may, I'll start with the questions that Tonneson's trying to nail me to the ground with here. So, is it a problem that other countries share China's views on you needing permission to conduct military operations in the exclusive economic zone? I don't think it's a problem. I think the United States is disappointed other countries don't share its view on what high seas freedoms are permitted or not, but I don't think it's a particular problem. Now, to be perfectly candid, by the same token, we don't conduct a lot of surveillance operations on those other countries either, so the nuisance value is very low compared to China. And so, but it's, I think it would be, the best way to characterize it is the U.S. is disappointed that the scales have not fallen from their eyes and they realize the wisdom of America's approach. Freedom of navigation operations for other countries in the South China Sea or wherever. As long as people understand U.S. freedom of navigation operations are not deterrent operations. They are not intended to be a deterrent signal. They are intended to be the operational manifestation of a diplomatic protest about an excessive maritime claim. So sometimes people come and you hear them talk about, you should do more fine, or it's like you want it by the pound. Can I have 20 pounds more of freedom of navigation operations, please? And so if other countries, if they share America's views that excessive maritime claims deserve to be protested diplomatically and as appropriate, protested with a tangible operation, then yes, I think the United States and other like-minded countries would be happy to see more people do it. But if they're doing it just to send a signal of deterrence or what have you, I think confusing deterrence with a protest about an excessive maritime claim can get very confusing. So it's very important that if people are going to do that, they do it, because it is also means that there'll be a diplomatic démarche to the embassy in Beijing to accompany it or beforehand. And it's not something you need to do every other day. It doesn't have to be done frequently. It just has to be done periodically. On the issue of submarines and incidents at sea, types of things, remember, when submarines are submerged, communications is very difficult. And so you don't have the ability to call somebody up on bridge-to-bridge radio and say, what are you doing? And so the way you deconflict submarine operations is you have to have an understanding of water space. In other words, in this block of water, my submarine is operating, so you stay out. Well, that means you have to tell people where your submarine is operating, and nobody wants to do that. The advantage of having a submarine operating submerged is nobody knows where you are. And so if you're going to have a water space management scheme where you're telling everybody where you are, you have to be very careful on who you're telling that to. And so the idea of involving submarines in some sort of navigational deconfliction process, I would be willing to bet almost every country's submarine operations are classified. And so that means you have to have an understanding on how you handle classified information with your friend or your ally or whoever it is, and the fact that they're not going to tell their friend where you're operating. So essentially, those are some of the inhibitions to trying to come up with deconfliction of submarine operations in any body of water. Now, there is no doubt about it, with all the submarines that are potentially going to be running around the South China Sea, there's every probability that you're going to have an underwater collision at some point in the future. But how you reconcile the covert nature of submarine operations versus safety is a very difficult problem, I think. Those are my views. Anybody else wants to chime in on that?
Okay, I'm talking about the freedom of navigation and also cooperation with the United States Navy. We have, Japan has almost same concept on usage of the EEZ for military assets. So, and the second question is how should Japan to think about the cooperation on the freedom of navigation or overflight operation in the South China Sea? So far, as you may know, we have a problem, political problem on the Senkaku issue. with China and Taiwan. So it is quite not good politically for Japan to make freedom of navigation operation with the United States at this moment, at least. So I think Japanese politicians are thinking, I guess, I don't know, but I guess. So politically thinking, that kind of thing would not be conducted by the self-defense, maritime self-defense force, Japanese Navy. However, we have been already making every effort to tackle on combined exercise, or in not only surface ship, battleship, but also the aircraft carrier, aircraft with the United States and other sub-regional countries, including Vietnam or Philippines. Because we have been for a long time, from the 1950s or 1960s, we have been made a footprint of us in the South China Sea. Not only surface ship, but also the airplane, including the submarine for training purpose. So this is not unusual case for Japan to send the training purpose or some exercise for exercise. And so, but nowadays there are many submarine would be appearance in the South China Sea. There must be another consideration would be needed, as he pointed out. For the WPNS, Western Pacific Naval Symposium, or other professional naval admirals or higher ranking officials meeting, they show the concern over this matter. But of course, as he said, this is not, they didn't finding out to solve this matter at this moment. Thank you.
Since you now have 6 submarines, you need to tell us what you're thinking.
Với tư cách là một quốc gia đang phát triển,
Developing as a country who is developing our submarine fleet, I wish to also have some words. First of all, we have a long coastal line of more than 3,000 kilometers, and we are claiming an EEZ and continental shelf, which are quite large. Then it is very natural that we have a need for procurement of 6 submarines. So if we take a look at the fleet of Vietnam's Navy, we can see that we only procure weapons only for national protection. And we don't have any big sea liners or offshore liners. We only have coastal or nearshore quick attacking vessels. However, I also agree that when we have 6 more submarines, and together with other existing submarines, of course, it is quite likely to have, or it is obvious that the likelihood of conflicts among submarines is more. So that's why I agree with the expansion or the application of submarines in queues. However, I agree with the Admiral that this is not very easy. However, if relevant countries in the region can show their political will and can show mutual reliability, then that is still possible, and it is very necessary for us to include submarines in queues.
That's a very positive response. Admiral Aziz?
First is on the surveillance as part of freedom of navigation program, which I think the chair has answered. I'd just like to add to that in saying that there are 18 countries that impose restriction, and 3 of them are in this region. Now, it differs in the sense of the interpretation of what UNCLOS freedom of the sea is. And while countries have got difference of opinion what freedom means, they are looking at the surveillance more towards something that is prudential to good order of a particular country, right? Safety of the coastal state, so is an issue of security. So it depends mostly on the dialogues that we're going to have within countries that are doing the freedom of navigation program with the country itself and how they perceive what the U.S. is doing. Is it something as what was mentioned, is it a protest or is it in a form of a deterrence? Now, on the desire to include others to join into whatever mechanism that we have in South China Sea, should we have a mechanism of control, let's the countries that are facing the issues in South China Sea have the mechanism first, then later to expand it, whether to include others, and others like the EU. EU, I don't think most of them operates in this area, except for the submarine perhaps, because nobody knows where the submarines are operating. Now, on the issue of the submarine, if I'm not mistaken, we have got a program by the United States where if submarine training area. Now, if a submarine goes out for training, there are certain areas that are given where the submarine can be for them to conduct training. Now that others will share interests, but the submarine operating area is something that they are not sharing at this particular moment.
I think before we conclude, I think there was one other aspect of the question. No, we're out of time. I'm afraid I can't take more questions, but you asked about will China change its views on the EZ, and the answer what I'd say is no. I think the PLA Navy will take advantage of those who don't, like the United States, who don't request permission and do that, but there's no reason for them to change their views, I don't think. So with that, can you join me in thanking a very informative panel for our conversation? And it's now 12:15 and we're adjourned for lunch. And I've forgotten what time we come back, but it's probably about an hour from now. So. We come back at 20 minutes after 1, 13:20.